The Sheikh's laughter tore through the Riviera dining room, loud and cruel. "I'll give you 1,000 euros if you serve me in French," he mocked, never imagining the language of the elite was the waitress's mother tongue, or that dignity was priceless. The world was divided into two kinds of people, Layla Benoit knew. Those who looked you in the eye, and those who looked through you. At Le Jardin d'Aiguillon, the five-star sanctuary nestled in the heart of Cannes, 90% of the clientele belonged to the latter. "Hi, my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Thank you so for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin." Layla moved through the dining room with the practiced grace of a seasoned performer, though her stage was polished marble and her costume was a sleek black uniform. She was 27, but the strain of 5 years working 2 jobs and paying off crippling hospital debt had etched lines of exhaustion around her dark, intense eyes. Tonight, those eyes were fixed on the silver tray in her hand, on the delicate glasses of chilled Chateau Margaux she carried with professional precision. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a ghost in the machine, deliberately invisible. It was easier that way, safer. If they didn't see her, they couldn't ask why a woman with a near-perfect score in Lettres Modernes from the Sorbonne was refilling their water glasses. They couldn't ask why she sold her future for her little sister's survival. "Table September, Layla. And be quick. They are difficult." The whisper came from Yasmin, the restaurant manager, her voice tight with worry. Table 7 was the private alcove. And tonight, Table 7 was a spectacle. In the opulent suite overlooking the moonlit Mediterranean, Rashid Al-Fayed, the man who represented 10% of the world's accessible oil, was holding court. He was breathtakingly handsome, even at 35, with a sculpted beard, eyes that suggested deep boredom, and a flawless white thobe that seemed to absorb and reflect every ounce of the room's light. His power wasn't in his words, it was in the expectation of compliance that preceded them. He laughed now, a sound that grated on Layla's nerves, loud, self-satisfied, and requiring no participation from anyone else. It was the sound of money having the last word. "You see, Kamal," Rashid was saying to one of his subordinates, adjusting the heavy gold bezel of his Patek Philippe watch, "Europeans are obsessed with this concept of culture. They think their language, their food, makes them superior. But look around." He swept his hand dismissively toward the main dining room. "The end result is always the same. Someone is serving you wine, and for the right price, they will do anything." The subordinate, a young man named Talal who always seemed to carry a flicker of discomfort in his gaze, managed a weak chuckle. Layla stopped just outside the alcove door, the delicate crystal glasses slightly cold against her fingertips. She could hear the rhythmic tap-tap of Rashid's watch against the glass tabletop, a percussive reminder of the time she was wasting and the debt that was waiting. She took a deep, steadying breath. Inhale the silence. Exhale the exhaustion. Inside her mind, she could hear the voice of her sister, Salma, from that morning, struggling through her French grammar homework. "Courage, Layla. Courage." Layla pushed through the door. The cloying, heavy scent of Rashid's expensive oud cologne mixed with the aroma of white truffle and aged wine, a suffocating atmosphere of old, unquestioned wealth. She moved to the side of the table. "Bonsoir, messieurs," she said, her voice low and professionally neutral, her accent a careful, unplaceable Parisian blend. "May I take your order?" Rashid didn't look up immediately. He was examining the wine list, holding it as if it were contaminated. "Ah, the service arrives," he murmured to his company, finally raising his eyes. They were dark, arrogant, and lingered on her uniform, completely bypassing her face. "But first, tell me, mademoiselle," he drawled, his French passable but heavily accented, "how much of what I say do you truly comprehend?" Layla did not flinch. She simply angled her little notepad and pen, ready to take the order. She knew the game. The humiliation must be met with silence. "I comprehend enough to perform my duties perfectly, monsieur," she replied, her voice soft but steady. Rashid smirked, turning back to his guests. See. They understand the vocabulary of servitude, nothing more. A mind for survival, but not for thought. That is the tragedy of this class. The entourage laughed on cue. Talal shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Yasmin, watching from the kitchen entrance, bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. She knew Rashid Al-Fayed could end careers and ruin the restaurant's reputation with a single phone call. She silently prayed Layla would endure the insult. Layla fought the tremor that wanted to run through her hands. Years of academic success, years of poring over philosophy texts, years of teaching herself multiple languages just to survive, all dismissed in a single, entitled wave of the hand. She took another quiet breath, remembering Salma. The hospital bills. The rent. This is not personal. This is transaction. Monsieur Al-Fayed, she tried again, gently steering the conversation back to business. Shall I begin with the wine list, or would you like to hear today's specials? Rashid finally put the menu down with a dramatic flourish. He fixed his gaze on Layla, his eyes shining with a predatory amusement. He was enjoying this far too much. He leaned back, his powerful hands gripping the arms of his chair. We could make this interesting, he said, his voice dropping slightly, ensuring everyone at the table and Layla herself were paying attention. He picked up his champagne flute, letting the golden mote splash slightly over the silk tablecloth. I will make you a proposition. Layla maintained her professional, cold demeanor. I am not permitted to accept propositions, monsieur. Only orders. He laughed, a bigger, more challenging sound this time. This is an order of currency, petite. I will pay you 1,000 euros, cash, right now. He snapped his fingers, and one of his aides immediately produced a heavy roll of bills. 1,000 euros, right now, Rashid repeated, his eyes mocking her desperate economic situation. If you complete the rest of my service, entirely in French. Pure, clean Parisian French. Can you do it, mademoiselle? Can you earn a month's salary in a single hour? The entire private dining room, and several customers who had crept closer, held their breath. This wasn't a challenge, it was a public execution of dignity. Layla's throat tightened, but she did not move. For one long, frozen moment, she stood there, caught between her survival and her soul. She looked directly into Rashid's arrogant, bored eyes, and felt an unfamiliar, explosive rage mixed with a liberating knowledge of her own secret weapon. This is the moment. Sink, or swim. She set the silver tray down on the nearby serving table with a soft, deliberate clink. The sound resonated in the tense silence. Before continuing this story, I have a question for you. How do you think Layla's deep-seated pride and Sorbonne background will affect her reaction? Will she accept the money and endure the shame, or will her intellect finally force her to break her silence? Share your thoughts in the comments. The air in the private alcove thickened, becoming heavy, almost metallic. Layla's heart hammered against her ribs, not with fear, but with a fierce, adrenaline-fueled certainty. She could feel every eye in the vicinity, her manager's wide, terrified gaze, the curious stares of the surrounding elite, and most intensely, Rashid's smug, expectant smirk. He was waiting for the look of submission, the calculating pause that precedes a difficult choice. He was waiting for her to weigh her pride against 1,000 euros, a sum he knew she desperately needed. Rashid casually tossed the roll of bills onto the table. They scattered near a wine glass, a vulgar display of power. Well, petite. I am a busy man. Do you need a moment to translate the offer? Perhaps I should raise the stakes? 2,000. He leaned forward, enjoying his mastery over her silence. A moment of humiliation, and your sister can eat for a month. A worthy transaction, wouldn't you agree? Layla felt the blood drain from her face, but her jaw remained locked. The mention of Salma was the final, unforgivable insult. It wasn't about the money anymore, it was about the weaponizing of her pain. She took one last, deep breath, tasting the stale air of luxury. She lifted her chin, meeting Rashid's eyes with a steady, dangerous calm that stunned the smile off his face. Très bien, Monsieur Al-Fayed, she said. Her voice, usually soft, now cut through the heavy atmosphere like crystal splintering. It was perfectly articulated, the accent impeccable, pure, high Parisian French, honed by years of intense academic study. It was the French of the highest social and intellectual class, not the transactional French of the service industry. The silence that followed was absolute. The background music, a delicate, elegant piano piece, seemed to die on a high, dissonant note. Rashid's entourage exchanged confused, uncomfortable glances. They understood the words, but they hadn't expected the delivery. They had expected a clumsy attempt, a nervous breakdown, or submission. Not this. Layla did not rush. She let the silence hold. She let him see the dignity he thought he could buy. Then, she delivered the reply, her tone precise, courteous, and devastatingly loaded. Her eyes never left his. Voudriez-vous commencer par la carte de vins, Monsieur Al-Fayed? She asked, her voice like silk over steel. Would you like to begin with the wine list, Mr. Al-Fayed? Rashid merely stared, his mouth slightly open, the arrogance draining away to be replaced by raw, unadulterated surprise. Layla pressed her advantage, her voice gaining a cold, intellectual authority that brooked no challenge. Oh, devrais-je d'abord vous apprendre quelques bons manners? Or should I first teach you some good manners? She paused for a beat, a slow, agonizing beat that stretched the tension past the breaking point. Car, Illinois semble que l'argent ne quitte pas l'éducation. Because, it seems that money doesn't buy education. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The scattered euros on the table suddenly looked cheap, garish, and utterly vulgar. Rashid's face, usually so composed, went pale beneath his tan. His entourage sat frozen, some openly gaping. Talal, the younger partner, instinctively looked down at his own untouched glass of water, shame painted on his features. Yasmin, watching from the periphery, covered her mouth, a silent scream of shock and terrified admiration. Layla had just detonated a bomb in the heart of the restaurant's power structure. Rashid tried to regain control, to laugh it off, but the sound that escaped his throat was a pathetic, strangled cough. You speak French, he stammered, the words suddenly heavy and foreign on his own tongue. His tone had completely lost its commanding edge, reduced to mere disbelief. Layla allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a professional smile that was edged with quiet triumph. Let's just say, monsieur, she replied, switching back to French that was now laced with exquisite irony, that I understand enough to know when someone is attempting to humiliate me, and enough to know that respect is not a commodity that can be purchased. She picked up the silver tray she had placed on the service table and held it again, her hands no longer trembling. The tray was her shield and her tool. She looked at the roll of bills lying ignominiously on the table beside the crumbs. Your offer is noted. But my dignity is not for sale, not even for 1,000 euros, monsieur. Please let me know when you are ready to order with the respect due to any human being. She gave a small, formal dip of her head, a gesture of professional courtesy that felt, in this context, like a profound, total defeat for Rashid. Then, she turned and walked away. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor. Each click was a small victory, a silent declaration that the wealth and arrogance of Rashid Al-Fayed had just lost a battle against a tired waitress who simply refused to be small. Behind her, the private room remained in absolute, stunned silence. The sheer, clean audacity of her response had silenced the rich and powerful. Rashid sat immobile, his handsome face contorted, not in anger, but in the confusing, unfamiliar flush of profound, public shame. He had been measured, found wanting, and dismissed by the woman he had tried to buy. He felt something twist in his gut, not rage, but an agonizing curiosity. He needed to know who this woman was, and why his easy power had failed so spectacularly against her quiet strength. Layla risked her livelihood to protect her dignity. If you were Layla, facing immense financial pressure, would you have chosen to speak out, or would you have swallowed your pride for the sake of survival? Drop your answer in the comments below. Layla reached the polished steel sanctuary of the kitchen, feeling a dizzying mix of elation and dread. She moved with purpose, grabbing a cloth and furiously polishing a stack of fresh silverware, her hands moving too fast, too violently. Layla! What in God's name was that? Yasmin, the manager, materialized beside her, her face a mask of conflicting emotions: admiration, terror, and professional panic. She gripped Layla's arm, her voice a low, frantic hiss. "Do you know who that is? Rashid Al-Fayed. He owns half of the Côte d'Azur. He can have this place shut down for a bad soufflé, let alone a public humiliation. He can ensure you never work in hospitality again, Layla." Layla didn't look up from the silverware. She saw her own frantic reflection in the polished surface. "He asked for French. I gave him French, Yasmin. The restaurant promises impeccable French service. I provided it. This isn't about the menu, and you know it." Yasmin pleaded, looking around nervously. "This is about power. About face. You challenged his power. Why? €1,000 could have covered Salma's tuition next semester." Layla finally stopped, placing the cloth down. Her eyes were cold, distant. "And what price would I have paid for that tuition, Yasmin? To stand there and let him tell me my mind is worthless, that my only value is in my ability to carry his wine? No." She shook her head firmly. "I can lose the job, but I can't lose my dignity. If I let him buy that, I lose everything I am trying to teach Salma." She was terrified, though. Underneath the cold certainty was a knot of fear. She had acted on instinct, on years of suppressed rage, but the practical consequences were terrifying. She mentally calculated the remaining debt, the rent due next week. The cost of her moral victory was likely destitution. She worked the rest of the night in a haze, expecting the summons, the curt order to collect her final paycheck. Every time the kitchen door swung open, her heart leaped, ready for the axe to fall. But the call never came. Rashid, the anchor of arrogance. In the private alcove, the silence broke not with fury, but with nervous coughing and rushed excuses. Rashid's entourage scrambled to leave, offering thin, weak defenses of their leader. "Saidi, she must have been briefed," Kamal stammered, gathering the scattered euros like they were suddenly worthless trash. "A translator, perhaps. She must be an actress, planted to cause trouble." "Yes, she was lucky, Saidi," another agreed quickly. Rashid ignored them. He merely stared at the empty space where Layla had stood, his handsome face rigid. He didn't feel anger, he felt a bewildering sense of exposure. His power had failed. His wealth, his most trusted weapon, had been rejected, not with hatred, but with a cool, intellectual dismissal. It was a failure of control, and it stung worse than any business loss. He picked up his glass of Dom Perignon, intending to finish it, but the bubbly liquid suddenly felt flat and bitter. She was lucky, he told himself, echoing his subordinates. She must be a student from the nearby language school, moonlighting. A coincidence. He needed to rationalize it, to reduce her to a manageable variable. If she was just a clever, temporary irritant, he could forget her. If she was a philosophical force, a reflection of his own soulless existence, he was in trouble. He tried to distract himself, pulling up market reports on his encrypted tablet. Gold futures. Oil projections. The numbers, usually a soothing balm, blurred before his eyes. All he could hear was her voice. L'argent eniquite pas l'éducation. Later, alone in his suite at the Grand Hyatt, looking out over the endless, shimmering blue of the Mediterranean, Rashid found himself pacing. He was accustomed to solving problems with a signature or a transfer of funds. This problem, a waitress's dignity, was intangible. He called his personal assistant Karim, ostensibly to arrange a flight to Dubai, signaling a return to business. "Karim, prepare the jet. I'll be leaving in 48 hours. "Very good, Saidi. And the dinner reservations in Cannes? Should I cancel the rest of your week?" Rashid paused by the window. He was supposed to be moving on, forgetting the incident, returning to his world where he was absolute. But the idea of leaving, of accepting defeat, felt unbearable. He hadn't just been challenged, he'd been given a mirror he didn't want to look into. "No," Rashid finally said, his voice flat. He slowly adjusted the expensive cufflink on his wrist, a nervous tick of a man shaken out of control. "Keep the reservations. All of them." He hung up, annoyed with himself. Why? Why would he stay in a city where he'd been embarrassed? He closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the cool glass. He wasn't staying to confront her. He was staying to study her. To prove her exceptional skill was an anomaly, not a condemnation of his entire existence. He needed to prove to himself that he could still command respect, even if he couldn't buy it. He needed to see her again, just to rationalize the shock away. He didn't realize that in denying the emotional significance of the encounter, he was already laying the foundation for an obsession. 2 days passed in agonizing slow motion. Layla worked, but she moved with the hypervigilance of someone expecting an attack. The restaurant staff treated her with a mixture of reverence and distance. She was the girl who stood up to the sheik, but she was also a ticking time bomb. Yasmin gave her wide berth, offering only quick, worried glances. The dreaded call from the administration never came, a silence that Layla found more unsettling than a reprimand. It meant Rashid had not complained. It meant he hadn't dismissed the incident. It meant he was still thinking about her. On the third evening, the tension broke. Layla saw him enter. Not through the private entrance, but through the main dining room. He was alone, without his usual entourage, dressed in an understated dark Armani suit instead of the imposing white thobe. He looked less like a figurehead and more like a wealthy, very guarded man. He didn't demand attention. He simply walked to a small, isolated table in the corner, away from the spectacle, away from the social theater, and sat down. Yasmin approached him first, her smile tight. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Al-Fayed. Do you desire the private alcove tonight?" "No, thank you, Yasmin," Rashid replied, his voice quieter than before. It was devoid of the commanding boom, merely polite. "This corner is perfect." He paused, then added, his eyes scanning the room until they found Layla near the bar. "And I wish to be served by Mademoiselle Benoit, please." Yasmin froze. "Ah, I see. Monsieur, may I suggest?" "I insist," Rashid interrupted, his tone firm, but still measured. "Only Mademoiselle Benoit." Yasmin swallowed hard and nodded, shooting a look of utter panic toward Layla. Layla knew she couldn't refuse. Her contract dictated she serve any assigned table. She took her notepad and pen, walked across the marble floor, and approached the table that felt less like a job and more like walking into a trap. The air around Rashid was different tonight. Not arrogant, but heavy with an unfamiliar gravity. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Al-Fayed," Layla said, her voice perfectly level, professional, and cool to the point of hostility. "What may I take your order for tonight?" Rashid looked up. For the first time, their eye contact was sustained. He didn't look through her, he looked at her. He even offered a brief, awkward smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No dinner tonight, thank you. Just a coffee. Un café noir, sans sucre." Layla jotted the order down. Her hand was steady. "Very well, monsieur." She started to turn away, but Rashid spoke, his voice low and carefully chosen. "And a conversation, if you would grant me that opportunity." Layla stopped, her back still partially toward him. "That depends entirely on the topic, monsieur." "It's about the other night," he admitted, avoiding the easy route of denial. He adjusted the knot of his silk tie, using the motion as an anchor. "About how you managed to turn the entire room against me in 5 seconds. About how you made me look." Layla slowly turned back, crossing her arms over her notepad, her eyes sharp. "I did nothing to you, monsieur. I merely spoke your language. You were the one who decided how to use it. Or rather, how to misuse it." Rashid took a small, inward breath. He lifted his hands slightly, a gesture of surrender. "You are right. And I deserved that moment of humiliation. I am not used to being challenged, and certainly not by someone I assumed was merely an accessory to the meal. He paused, studying the immaculate white tablecloth as if searching for an answer in the fabric. I called my team the next day. I told them to find the source of the language school, the theater troupe. I was trying to rationalize it, trying to prove it was a trick. Layla watched him, fascinated despite herself. This was not the predator from 2 nights ago. This was a man stripped bare of his usual weaponry, forced to articulate something uncomfortable. "Did they find anything, monsieur?" she asked, the sarcasm just barely contained in her tone. Rashid shook his head slowly. "No. They found nothing. That is what interested me the most." He finally met her eyes again. "You are not just a waitress, Mademoiselle Benoit. And I am curious to know what kind of life forces a mind like yours to serve coffee to people like me." He reached for the water glass, his hand gripping the crystal, finding security in the texture. This was his forced proximity, not physical, but a calculated emotional boundary breach. He was demanding her story as payment for his curiosity. Layla remained unmoving, her expression unreadable. She felt the pressure of his genuine interest, which was far more insidious than his scorn. It was easier to fight arrogance than to handle sincerity. "Nobody is just anything, monsieur," she replied, her voice cooling again. "Everyone has a story. Everyone has dreams they sacrificed for survival. The only difference is that some people, like you, prefer not to look, and some of us are forced to be invisible so you don't have to." She picked up the order for the coffee. "I will bring your café noir. If you require more conversation, you will have to wait for my next visit. This is a working restaurant." She turned and walked back to the kitchen, leaving Rashid alone with his black coffee, and the realization that he couldn't buy her attention, her story, or her respect. He could only earn it. He sat there, watching the exact spot where she stood, the coffee untouched, and felt a strange, compelling pull. She was a mystery, a genuine challenge, the only person in years who had refused to play his game. Rashid spent the next day wrestling with Layla's words. "Nobody is just anything. Some of us are forced to be invisible." Her refusal to be bought or charmed had cracked the veneer of his entitlement, replacing it with an unbearable curiosity. He realized his previous inquiries were superficial. He needed more than rumors. That afternoon, back in his sterile, luxurious suite, he made the call to his executive assistant, Karim. The request this time was not an order, but a measured, quiet demand. "Karim, forget the language school. I need a full, discreet profile on Mademoiselle Layla Benoit. University records, family history, everything. This is highly sensitive and strictly confidential." The information arrived late that night on an encrypted tablet. Rashid dismissed Karim and sat down, feeling a strange mix of guilt and anticipation. He knew he was violating her trust, but he rationalized it as necessary for understanding the threat she posed to his composure. He scrolled through the facts. Layla Benoit, age 27. Former student, Sorbonne University, Lettres Modernes, French Literature and Philosophy. Average, outstanding. Rashid paused, a flicker of genuine respect crossing his face. A Sorbonne mind, serving his coffee. Then he reached the turning point. Scholarship cancelled 3 years prior. Reason, voluntary withdrawal due to severe family illness, mare, cancer. Financial status, precarity. Current debt, he saw the figure, 45,000 euros in medical bills, compounded by the responsibility of a minor sister, Salma, age 14. Understated dark Armani suit instead of the imposing white thobe. He looked less like a figurehead and more like a wealthy, very guarded man. He didn't demand attention. He simply walked to a small, isolated table in the corner, away from the spectacle, away from the social theater, and sat down. Yasmin approached him first, her smile tight. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Al-Fayed. Do you desire the private alcove tonight?" "No, thank you, Yasmin," Rashid replied, his voice quieter than before. It was devoid of the commanding boom, merely polite. "This corner is perfect." He paused, then added, his eyes scanning the room until they found Layla near the bar. "And I wish to be served by Mademoiselle Benoit, please." Yasmin froze. "Ah, I see. Monsieur, may I suggest—" "I insist," Rashid interrupted, his tone firm, but still measured. "Only Mademoiselle Benoit." Yasmin swallowed hard and nodded, shooting a look of utter panic toward Layla. Layla knew she couldn't refuse. Her contract dictated she serve any assigned table. She took her notepad and pen, walked across the marble floor, and approached the table that felt less like a job and more like walking into a trap. The air around Rashid was different tonight. Not arrogant, but heavy with an unfamiliar gravity. "Bonsoir, Monsieur Al-Fayed," Layla said, her voice perfectly level, professional, and cool to the point of hostility. "What may I take your order for tonight?" Rashid looked up. For the first time, their eye contact was sustained. He didn't look through her, he looked at her. He even offered a brief, awkward smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No dinner tonight, thank you. Just a coffee. Un café noir, sans sucre." Layla jotted the order down. Her hand was steady. "Very well, monsieur." She started to turn away, but Rashid spoke, his voice low and carefully chosen. "And a conversation, if you would grant me that opportunity." Layla stopped, her back still partially toward him. "That depends entirely on the topic, monsieur." "It's about the other night," he admitted, avoiding the easy route of denial. He adjusted the knot of his silk tie, using the motion as an anchor. "About how you managed to turn the entire room against me in 5 seconds. About how you made me look." Layla slowly turned back, crossing her arms over her notepad, her eyes sharp. "I did nothing to you, monsieur. I merely spoke your language. You were the one who decided how to use it. Or rather, how to misuse it." Rashid took a small, inward breath. He lifted his hands slightly, a gesture of surrender. "You are right. And I deserved that moment of humiliation. I am not used to being challenged, and certainly not by someone I assumed was merely an accessory to the meal." He paused, studying the immaculate white tablecloth as if searching for an answer in the fabric. "I called my team the next day. I told them to find the source of the language school, the theater troupe. I was trying to rationalize it. Trying to prove it was a trick." Layla watched him, fascinated despite herself. This was not the predator from 2 nights ago. This was a man stripped bare of his usual weaponry, forced to articulate something uncomfortable. "Did they find anything, monsieur?" she asked, the sarcasm just barely contained in her tone. Rashid shook his head slowly. "No. They found nothing. That is what interested me the most." He finally met her eyes again. "You are not just a waitress, Mademoiselle Benoit. And I am curious to know what kind of life forces a mind like yours to serve coffee to people like me." He reached for the water glass, his hand gripping the crystal, finding security in the texture. This was his forced proximity, not physical, but a calculated emotional boundary breach. He was demanding her story as payment for his curiosity. Layla remained unmoving, her expression unreadable. She felt the pressure of his genuine interest, which was far more insidious than his scorn. It was easier to fight arrogance than to handle sincerity. "Nobody is just anything, monsieur," she replied, her voice cooling again. "Everyone has a story. Everyone has dreams they sacrificed for survival. The only difference is that some people, like you, prefer not to look, and some of us are forced to be invisible so you don't have to." She picked up the order for the coffee. "I will bring your café noir. If you require more conversation, you will have to wait for my next visit. This is a working restaurant." She turned and walked back to the kitchen, leaving Rashid alone with his black coffee, and the realization that he couldn't buy her attention, her story, or her respect. He could only earn it. He sat there, watching the exact spot where she stood, the coffee untouched, and felt a strange, compelling pull. She was a mystery, a genuine challenge, the only person in years who had refused to play his game. Rashid spent the next day wrestling with Layla's words. Nobody is just anything. Some of us are forced to be invisible. Her refusal to be bought or charmed had cracked the veneer of his entitlement, replacing it with an unbearable curiosity. He realized his previous inquiries were superficial. He needed more than rumors. That afternoon, back in his sterile, luxurious suite, he made the call to his executive assistant, Karim. The request this time was not an order, but a measured, quiet demand. Karim, forget the language school. I need a full, discreet profile on Mademoiselle Layla Benoit. University records, family history, everything. This is highly sensitive and strictly confidential. The information arrived late that night on an encrypted tablet. Rashid dismissed Karim and sat down, feeling a strange mix of guilt and anticipation. He knew he was violating her trust, but he rationalized it as necessary for understanding the threat she posed to his composure. He scrolled through the facts. Layla Benoit, age 27. Former student, Sorbonne University, Lettres Modernes, French Literature and Philosophy. Average, outstanding. Rashid paused, a flicker of genuine respect crossing his face. A Sorbonne mind, serving his coffee. Then he reached the turning point. Scholarship cancelled 3 years prior. Reason, voluntary withdrawal due to severe family illness, mare, cancer. Financial status, precarity. Current debt, he saw the figure, 45,000 euros in medical bills, compounded by the responsibility of a minor sister, Salma, age 14. He read the report 3 times, the cold facts striking him with the force of an emotional blow. It wasn't just a job, it was a cage forged of loyalty and necessity. She hadn't chosen poverty. Poverty had chosen her. Every insult, every look of disdain he'd given her, was now magnified tenfold by the stark reality of her sacrifice. He closed the tablet, the soft clack of the lid sounding like a gunshot in the silent room. He didn't feel vindicated, he felt nauseated. He remembered his own childhood, his mother's sudden, devastating illness and death when he was 12. He'd been shielded by wealth, moved from one gilded cage to the next, burying his grief beneath layers of entitlement. Layla had faced the same tragedy, but had fought it with a serving tray and a perfect degree of dignity. Layla, the unbearable intrusion. The following evening, Rashid returned to Le Jardin d'Aiguillon, taking his usual corner table. His eyes held a new intensity, a mixture of guilt and a desperate need to talk about what he knew. Layla approached him, professional as ever, but she noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. He wasn't arrogant, but strangely subdued, burdened. Bonsoir, Monsieur Al-Fayed. Your usual café noir. Yes, Layla. And I apologize, he said, using her first name deliberately, bypassing the formal address. I need to talk to you about something. Layla froze. The use of her name felt like an invasion. If this is about the wine list, monsieur, I am prepared. It's about the Sorbonne, he cut in, his voice low, urgent, and too close to a whisper. Your major in Lettres Modernes. And the debt. The reason you had to leave your scholarship and take care of your sister. The notepad and pen clattered onto the marble floor. The sound was stark and aggressive, cutting through the soft background music. Layla's composure shattered instantly. Her eyes, usually so carefully guarded, flared with protective rage. How dare you, she hissed, switching instantly to French, the language of her fury. Who gave you the right to pry into my life? Who told you my story? My life is not your entertainment, monsieur. It is not a document for your staff to dissect. Her voice trembled, but not from fear, from a fierce, wounded indignation. This was the ultimate violation. He had taken the last, small piece of privacy she had left. Rashid flinched, reeling from the raw emotion. Layla, please. I was only trying to understand. To rationalize why a mind you deemed worthless could defeat you. She stepped closer, her whole body radiating defiance. You had no right to do that. You think because you are rich, the rules of human decency disappear? You think my pain is a puzzle for you to solve. Rashid pushed back slightly from the table, genuinely overwhelmed by the intensity of her reaction. I know I crossed a line. I am sorry. But I needed to know why. Why someone so brilliant chose to endure this. I chose to survive. Layla shot back. I chose my family over my degree. Something you, Monsieur Al-Fayed, surrounded by convenience, can never possibly comprehend. I look at you and I see everything I had to give up. Her words, fueled by years of suppressed grief and necessity, finally hit home. Rashid looked down at his own manicured hands, the hands that had never truly worked, never suffered real loss without a financial cushion. My mother died when I was young, he murmured, his voice cracking, revealing a vulnerability that was entirely new. I was 12. I never dealt with it. I just buried the pain under layers of gold. I see you, Layla, and I don't see a victim. I see the courage I wish I had when I was facing my own emptiness. He looked up, meeting her gaze. His eyes were haunted, vulnerable, the eyes of a lost boy finally revealed beneath the rich man's shell. I am truly sorry I invaded your privacy. But I understand now. You keep your dignity because it is the only thing the money cannot touch. I regret my behavior the other night more than any business loss I have ever taken. The raw confession hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Layla searched his eyes, looking for the lie, the mockery, the trick. But she found only genuine regret and a mirroring of pain, the shadow of loss he had carried, too. She stepped back, retrieving her notepad with a shaky hand. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a devastating, soft sadness. Do not try to clean your conscience with my sacrifice, monsieur, she said, her voice now dangerously quiet. I do not need your pity. And I certainly do not need your redemption. She turned quickly, unable to stand the sudden intimacy, the shocking moment of shared trauma. She walked to the bar, her perfect composure almost restored, but inside, the protective walls she had built around her past had cracked, and the pain was seeping out. Rashid did not leave the restaurant immediately. He sat for another hour, the untouched coffee growing cold, feeling the profound sting of Layla's words. Do not try to clean your conscience with my sacrifice. She was right. He had sought to understand her for his own peace, to neutralize the uncomfortable mirror she held up. The next 3 nights, he returned. But this time, his approach was subtly different. He wore simple business attire. He ordered the same black coffee. And he waited patiently until Layla had finished serving her other tables. He stopped being the sheikh. He became, simply, Rashid. When Layla approached him on the 3rd night, she was still wary, but the intense hostility had softened into a cool, guarded curiosity. Monsieur Al-Fayed, she began professionally, I hope your evening has been quiet. It has, he replied, meeting her gaze calmly. And I have come to realize something. I am accustomed to paying for information. But the truth about you is not for sale. He paused. I want to hear about lettres modernes. Not the debt that stopped you, but the passion that started you. Layla was taken aback by the genuine request. She leaned against the empty service table nearby, professional distance maintained, but the intellectual challenge was too great to ignore. What is there to tell, monsieur? I loved Ronsard, I studied Sartre. I specialized in the philosophy of language, specifically, how we use words to construct our identity and to oppress others. A slow, genuine smile finally touched Rashid's lips. Ah, the mechanism of oppression. You certainly demonstrated mastery of that subject the other night. You used the French language not for domination, but for defense. Layla permitted a faint, dry smile, the first true, unguarded humor he had seen from her. The greatest defense is a solid argument, monsieur. Or, as I have learned, a well-placed insult in the perfect tense. Rashid laughed, a clear, unrestrained sound. It was the laugh of a man who was genuinely amused, not one who demanded obedience. I concede. My French is a businessman's tool. Yours is a weapon forged in the Sorbonne. He leaned in slightly, his eyes alight with genuine interest. Tell me about Camus. Do you believe in rebellion against the absurd, or resignation? For the next 10 minutes, they spoke not as employer and employee, not as rich and poor, but as two intellectuals debating existentialism. Layla forgot the clatter of the kitchen and the pressure of the debt. She spoke of her thesis, the silent courage of the working class against abstract injustice, her words fluent, brilliant, passionate. Rashid listened intently, asking probing, intelligent questions. He didn't interrupt or boast. He simply absorbed her intellect. Layla realized with a jolt that in all her years of glittering high-society service, this man, the one who had humiliated her, was the first person who had actually seen her mind. It sounds like a magnificent rebellion, Rashid concluded, leaning back, the arrogance entirely gone. To maintain your internal world when the external world tries to crush you. That is real strength. Layla felt an uncomfortable warmth spread through her. She was opening up, giving away pieces of herself she had kept locked away for years. This felt dangerous, intimate. It is only survival, monsieur, she insisted, pulling back into the safety of her professional role. No, Rashid countered softly, shaking his head. Survival is what my staff does. They are paid to agree with me. What you are doing, what you chose to do with the 1,000 euros. That is courage. And it is the most valuable thing I have encountered in a very long time. He asked her one last question, simple and profound. Layla, if the debt vanished tomorrow, if you could have any life, what would you do? She looked out the window, past the restaurant and into the deep blue night. I would teach. I would write. I would make sure other girls who came from nothing knew that their intellect was their greatest currency. A waiter brought Rashid's bill. Layla retrieved it, her hands steady, her mind reeling from the conversation. As she returned with his card and the receipt, Rashid was already finished. He paid the exact amount of the bill, then added a generous, but not obscene, tip for the service. But tucked beneath the receipt, Layla found a small, thick square of expensive paper. It was folded neatly, and on it, written in beautiful flowing Arabic calligraphy, was a simple phrase. Aliteram huwa al-jizr baina alamain. Respect is the bridge between two worlds. Layla picked up the paper, her fingers brushing the rich texture. She looked up, but Rashid was already gone, having slipped out quietly, leaving no spectacle, no demand for attention. He had left her a philosophical truth, not a monetary transaction. Layla stood there, the Arabic script burning a hole in her palm. The wall of cold certainty she had built around her heart trembled violently. He wasn't trying to buy her anymore. He was trying to build a bridge. Rashid is finally seeing Layla as an intellectual equal and showing genuine respect. Do you think Layla should trust this sudden change, or is she right to remain guarded, suspecting his motives are still ultimately self-serving? Join the conversation below. The fragile bridge of respect Rashid had started to build was violently demolished 3 days later. Layla was on her lunch break, scrolling through a local Riviera news site while sipping a weak coffee. She paused, choking on her drink. A banner headline screamed at her from the screen, accompanied by a grainy, paparazzi photo of Rashid, taken while he was leaving the restaurant alone, and a zoomed-in shot of Layla at the service bar. The headline was vicious, calculated, and designed to burn. Sheikh's latest toy, Sorbonne dropout serves up tears for cash. The article, clearly planted by a rival of Rashid's named Zaki, twisted the entire narrative. It painted Rashid not as a man seeking redemption, but as a callous collector of intellectual curiosities. Sources close to the powerful Al-Fayed reveal the Sheikh is indulging in a cruel new pastime, paying a disgraced former Sorbonne student, Layla Benoit, to serve him while mocking her failed academic dreams. The former Lettres Modernes major, who left the university due to crushing family debt, is reportedly dancing to his tune for meager tips, serving as a cautionary tale on the cost of pride. Al-Fayed, known for his predatory business style, clearly enjoys keeping his intellectual conquest under his thumb. Layla felt the blood rush from her head. It wasn't just the humiliation, it was the chilling realization that her deepest, most private pain, her mother's illness, the academic sacrifice, the crushing debt, had been weaponized, precisely because Rashid had known it. He had promised respect. He had promised a bridge. He had left her a philosophical note in beautiful Arabic. And yet, within days, her history was public domain, twisted into a venomous narrative that made her look like a pitiful, failed scholar playing for scraps. He betrayed me. The thought slammed into her with physical force. She jumped up, leaving her coffee, running back into the kitchen. Her hands trembled so violently she had to clench her fists. She felt dirty, exposed, cheapened. "Layla, what is it?" Yasmin asked, alarmed by her friend's white-hot fury. Layla shoved the phone into Yasmin's hands. Yasmin read the article, her expression cycling from shock to cold understanding. "Oh, Layla. This is Zaki, Rashid's rival. This is a hit piece on him, designed to make him look bad." "No, Yasmin." Layla's voice was a low, dangerous whisper. "He told them. He looked into my life. He found my weakness, he found my debt, and no matter his intentions, his world ensures that information is never private. He might not have published it, but he gave the ammunition. He used my story to settle his own conscience, and now his enemies are using it to destroy mine." She felt a devastating certainty. His world was too toxic, too volatile. She had been foolish to believe that his respectful glances and profound apologies could withstand the brutal transactional nature of his power. She had given him her vulnerability, and he had thrown it to the wolves. Rashid, the accusation. Rashid was furious when he saw the article. It was an obvious smear campaign orchestrated by Zaki, his competitor in a major infrastructure deal. The article had effectively painted Rashid as a cruel, entitled monster, leveraging a poor woman's tragedy. He immediately ordered his legal team to pursue Zaki and have the article retracted. But his greater concern was Layla. He drove straight to Jardin, abandoning his security detail. He found Layla standing behind the service bar, polishing glasses. Her posture was rigidly straight, her face a mask of cold, unyielding pain. He approached her quietly. "Layla, I saw the article. It's a lie. It's Zaki. He hacked my research files. I swear I didn't release that information." Layla slowly put the glass down. She didn't raise her voice, but her words were like shards of ice, sharp and precise. "It doesn't matter who released it, monsieur. It only matters who gathered it." She looked him directly in the eye, and the devastation in her gaze was more powerful than any physical slap. "I warned you," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I warned you my life was not your entertainment. You sought to understand my dignity, but your method was the same as your contempt, to possess and dissect. You crossed a boundary that cost me everything, my anonymity, my peace, my hard-won safety." Rashid stepped closer, reaching a hand toward her. "Layla, I am truly sorry. I was arrogant to think I could investigate you without consequence. I should have asked you, face to face, not researched you like a business asset." Layla recoiled from his touch, a harsh, visible jerk of rejection. "You speak of respect, monsieur, but you only know ownership. You left me a note saying, 'Respect is the bridge between two worlds.' Well, the moment you violated my privacy, that bridge burned. Your world is too vast, too toxic, and I cannot breathe here." She lowered her voice, her final words quiet, measured, and absolute, designed to burn the bridge completely. "I don't need your apology. I don't need your pity. And I certainly don't need your redemption. Please, leave this restaurant and never come back. If I see you again, I will walk away." She turned and marched into the kitchen, leaving Rashid standing alone by the bar. He felt a devastating hollow echo of the humiliation he had inflicted on her in Act 2, but this time, the wound was real, deep, and self-inflicted. He had failed the first, and only, test she had unknowingly given him. He had sought connection but defaulted to control, and in doing so, he had lost her. He was left staring at the empty glass rack, the quiet clatter of the kitchen the only sound accompanying his agonizing realization. He was truly alone. He had everything, but she was the one thing he couldn't buy, coerce, or conquer, and now he had destroyed his only chance to earn her respect. After Layla's stinging rejection, Rashid left the restaurant, not for his suite, but for the stark, empty solitude of his corporate jet hangar. He was furious, not at Layla, but at the nature of his own world, which had automatically betrayed the one thing he genuinely wanted: respect. He had 3 options. Avoidance: fly to Dubai, forget the incident, and let his legal team quietly handle the libel suit against Zaki. Retaliation: use his full financial weight to ruin Zaki, proving his dominance, but confirming Layla's judgment that he only knows ownership. Vulnerability: sacrifice a major asset to publicly defend Layla's character, not just his own reputation. He sat for hours, staring at the blueprints for the colossal infrastructure deal he was set to sign with Zaki's consortium, a deal worth billions. Zaki had timed the hit piece perfectly. Any public scandal would jeopardize the contract. Rashid realized he was facing his first true moral negotiation. If he signed the deal, he saved billions, but he would lose Layla forever, confirming her belief that money always wins. If he fought Zaki publicly, he would sacrifice the deal, but he would prove to Layla that his priorities had genuinely shifted. He called his chief counsel, Karim, early the next morning, his voice steady and resolute. Karim, contact Zaki's consortium immediately. Terminate negotiations on the infrastructure deal. Effective immediately, cite irreconcilable ethical conflicts and a breach of trust involving character assassination. Karim was aghast. Saidi, that deal is worth $7 billion. You can't scrap it over a tabloid article. I just did, Rashid stated. And here is the second part. I want a public statement released in every major European paper. The statement must not defend me. It must defend Mademoiselle Benoit. State clearly that she is a highly gifted scholar who sacrificed her academic career for her family, and that the report is a malicious fabrication by a business rival. He then did something completely unprecedented. He instructed his foundation to establish a new, fully funded European literary scholarship. The scholarship will be in perpetuity, Rashid dictated. It will be called the Layla Benoit Scholarship for Literary Courage. Its mandate is to support young women who face economic hardship but display exceptional intellectual integrity. The first allocation is to pay off all outstanding debts related to the family of Layla Benoit. He was choosing vulnerability over pride. He was using his immense power not for domination, but for redemption, sacrificing the largest business deal of his quarter to demonstrate that her dignity was, to him, worth more than 7 billion euros. Layla, the weight of proof. Layla had resigned from Le Jardin d'Aiguillon immediately after her conversation with Rashid, leaving Yasmin stunned but supportive. She retreated to her small apartment, helping Salma with her homework, waiting for the inevitable media storm to fully engulf them. She felt profound emptiness, convinced she had traded her career for a brief, burning moment of honesty, only to be crushed anyway. Then, Salma burst through the door, waving a phone. Layla, look. The news. Look. Layla reluctantly took the phone, expecting more shame. But the headline was different. Al-Fayed sacrifices billion-dollar deal, establishes scholarship in waitress's name. She read the public statement, the clear, unequivocal defense of her character, the termination of the deal with Zaki's consortium, and the shocking announcement of the Layla Benoit Scholarship for Literary Courage. The final sentence, written in a clear, personal tone that was unmistakably Rashid's, stated, Mademoiselle Benoit taught me that true value lies not in wealth, but in character. I pay this forward in respect for her immense sacrifice. A wave of overwhelming emotion hit Layla. It wasn't pity. It wasn't money. It was a monumental, public, permanent sacrifice of power, precisely designed to prove her right. He had heard her. His money could be used for good, not just for oppression. Minutes later, a simple, unmarked courier package arrived. Inside was a beautiful, leather-bound first edition of Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, the very philosophical work they had discussed. Tucked inside the cover was a small, handwritten note, this time in clear, perfect French. La dignité est un bouteille constant. Vous m'avez montré que l'on peut gagner. Maintenant, vivez la vie que vous avez sauvée. Dignity is a constant battle. You showed me that it can be won. Now, live the life you saved. Layla sat down, holding the heavy, comforting weight of the old book. The sheer scale of his sacrifice, the loss of billions to restore her name, was an act of redemptive love she never could have imagined. She saw that she had been fighting not just him, but the old, arrogant version of him. She had pushed him to the limit, and he had chosen her dignity over his fortune. Her choice now was simple. She could cling to her pain and her fear of the wealthy world that had hurt her, remaining safe but alone, or she could choose to acknowledge his radical change and step onto the bridge he had just publicly and expensively constructed. She lifted the phone, her hand no longer trembling with rage or fear, but with a quiet, certain hope. Layla called him the next day. Not to thank him for the scholarship. That was a public transaction, easily done through his foundation, but to accept the invitation to the bridge he had built. "I need to see you, Monsieur Al-Fayed," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Not at the restaurant. Somewhere neutral." "Rashid," he corrected her, the simple name sounding hesitant on his own tongue. "I would like that very much, Layla. Anywhere you choose." She chose a small, quiet cafe tucked away from the glamour of the Cannes promenade, a place filled with the smell of old paper and freshly ground coffee, a world away from the gilded confines of Le Jardin. Layla arrived first, wearing a simple dress, her hair down, looking like the Sorbonne scholar she was meant to be. When Rashid entered, he was alone, dressed in a simple cashmere sweater, no entourage, no sign of the powerful sheikh. He looked merely like a man who had lost 7 billion euros but found something priceless. He walked toward her, and for the first time, Layla saw uncertainty in his step, not arrogance. "Layla," he murmured, stopping by the table. "Rashid," she replied, offering a small, genuine smile. "Please, sit." He sat opposite her, placing his hands on the table, palms up, a gesture of vulnerability. "I am sorry for the article, the investigation, and for my initial cruelty," he began, not wasting time on pleasantries. "I realized that the moment I started seeing you as a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be respected, I failed. The scholarship, it's not payment, Layla. It's penance. It's the first honest thing my fortune has bought in years." Layla nodded. "I know. If it were payment, I wouldn't be here. It was the sacrifice, Rashid. Sacrificing the deal, choosing my name over your money. That proved everything I needed to know." She paused, her eyes searching his. "I came to tell you I was wrong, too. I was so afraid of being hurt by your world again, so focused on survival, that I clung to the idea that you couldn't change. I was ready to walk away, convinced you would only bring me shame." "You had every right," he said softly. "I didn't give you a single reason to trust me until I lost billions doing it." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "When I saw the headline about the scholarship, I realized how profoundly you had altered my course. I didn't care about the money. I cared that my act of respect was finally public, permanent, and worthy of the literary courage you embody. The language of trust." They sat there for an hour, talking not about philosophy, but about their feelings. Rashid confessed his decades of loneliness, the use of wealth as a defense mechanism, and the deep, unfamiliar respect he felt for a woman who could not be impressed. Layla spoke of the fear of failure, the weight of her sister's future, and the sheer relief of finally having her intellect, and not her uniform, acknowledged. "I have spent my life surrounding myself with people who agreed with me," Rashid admitted, a rare smile touching his lips. "You are the only person who dared to teach me." Layla smiled back, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced since she left the Sorbonne. "And you, Rashid, are the only person who forced me to remember who I was." She reached across the table and touched his hand, a small, hesitant gesture that bridged the worlds better than any billion-dollar deal. "What now?" she asked, her voice low. "You are still the sheikh, and I am still the girl with student debt, even if it's paid off." Rashid turned his hand over, intertwining his fingers with hers. We start with that bridge. We start as two people who choose to see and respect each other. We travel the world together, Layla. Not as a trophy or an employee, but as partners. You will teach me the real value of words, and I will show you that my world can be a force for the good you dreamed of. He took a deep breath, his eyes shining with an unexpected, pure affection. He was about to speak in English, the language of his business, when he stopped himself. He remembered the challenge, the setting, and the profound importance of the language that had shattered his arrogance and revealed her soul. He looked at Layla's hand in his, and spoke in the most profound language of all, the language of their connection. Layla, he whispered, his Parisian accent now smooth, practiced, and sincere. Voudriez-vous commencer par me laissez-vous monter mon monde? Avec respect, et avec amour. Layla, would you like to begin by letting me show you my world? With respect, and with love. Layla's eyes welled up, the echo of the night at Le Jardin ringing with a new, beautiful meaning. He wasn't challenging her. He was proposing to her, not with a ring, but with a shared language of the heart. Oui, monsieur, she replied, her voice husky with emotion, finally abandoning the cold professionalism. Oui, mon amour. Je crois que je le ferais. Yes, monsieur. Yes, my love. I believe I would. The two worlds had finally met, not in a cruel transaction, but on a bridge built from genuine respect and the courage to choose vulnerability over pride. The sheik had found redemption, and the waitress had finally found her true value, unexpected love. Layla and Rashid found love after a humiliating start. What universal lesson do you think their story teaches about the power dynamics in relationships and how true connection can overcome social barriers? Share your thoughts below.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.